and it is time once again to get solar powered. We welcome you back to another episode of the Solar Powered Podcast. I'm Ryan Hall from Loyal Hearts Media. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I think we've got a really powerful episode here today. And as I was speaking with our guests before we went on with this recording here, um, the phrase "it's always darkest before dawn" really, I think, jumped out in front of me in my space because I think a lot of people, when they see things, when they go through things in their lives, when they experience um, heartbreak and things that just really shake them to their soul, it takes a minute to kind of get out of that. And I think our guest is a great example of that. He's a men's coach named Drew Duraney. Um, he is the author of a memoir called "I'll Have What She's Having," and we'll certainly talk about that here. And he's a man who went through four soul-shaking moments in less than a year, and he came out on the other side. And it's a privilege to welcome Drew Duraney to the Solar Powered Podcast. Welcome aboard, my man.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, um, I guess first question is, what's your story?
Geez,
Where do we begin? I know that's a very broad
it,
question, but let's
well,
answer it however
I
whatever
yeah,
comes to mind. Yeah.
no, I've practiced this because I've gotten this question quite often in the last 4 or 5 years, and I always started with I say July 2015. It was probably about 10 days after the Independence Day, 4th of July, where I found out from my best friend my wife was leaving me, and when I say that to people, they're like, "Why would you find out from your best friend?" A lot of questions. So that's another story in and of itself. The point behind that is, I was blindsided, as many men are when you talk to them when they learn their wife is leaving them, because we don't really often see or notice the signs that are right in front of us that may dictate there's trouble down the road. And that all speaks to how men and women have a different thinking language. It's science, it's fact, it's true. And unless you're aware of that, many men and women don't thrive or strive to learn the thinking language of the other gender. And I didn't. And I really and so I was blindsided. And instead of going through the court system in Jersey, because Jersey's really not kind to men and children in the court system, we thankfully decided to go through mediation. And it was a painful yet rewarding 3 years in mediation, 3 years, because our sole focus was to do right by the children. And what was the reason why it was painstaking is, yeah, ultimately, and I didn't realize at the time that she already had made up her mind. Divorce is done. It's done. It's over. And it's very much the way women think methodically through that type of emotional situation. For me, Ryan, my mindset was I could still convince her to stay. And again, it's many times the male mind thinking I can fix this. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize how far down the thinking road she was. And I was just beginning to self reflect because I was blindsided. So, with that, those 3 years were very interesting. And the divorce was final April 3rd of 2018. Okay. So I walk out of the courthouse with this piece of paper, and I call it legal closure because there's many other types of closure, as you know.
Of course.
So legal closure is like done deal, boom, piece of paper, you're divorced. And even though I ultimately knew it was coming, when you have that piece of paper and you're walking out and it's done, there are different feelings. And I chose to have the feelings of I'm going to rise up. I got my 50th birthday was coming up on October 6th. So you're talking April 3rd to October 6th, 2018. 6 months. I'm like, chapter two. I threw myself the coolest, biggest 50th birthday party, Ryan. I had people from all aspects of my life come. You're talking from family to my own kids to college and afterwards and in between. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, as my mother says, man plans and God laughs. So unbeknownst to me, again blindsided, I didn't see this coming. At about the same time as my birthday, I had worked 24 years in healthcare, and the manager in my department accidentally let some patient information be discarded. So I reported a HIPAA violation because it's the right thing to do. You know, just tell the compliance officer this is what happened. Well, 10 days after my birthday, I was asked to come into human resources with the head of HR and my boss, and I was let go. It was a leadership change. Again, the quotation marks in the air. And so I was escorted out. I was locked out of the email system, so I couldn't even do anything about that. Escorted to my car, not allowed to go to my office. And my manager, she was charged with mailing all my stuff home, shipping everything from my office to my house. And 7 weeks later, one of those alerts comes up on LinkedIn, says, congratulate so and so on her promotion. So, yeah, so I did the right thing and I'm shown the door, and she was elevated to my director's position. So, you know, obviously I had certain feelings about the healthcare industry. It's broken just like any other industry. The thing was, as many men do, and I did, I tied my self-worth and self-identity to my significant other and my profession. I lost both in a 6-month span. So as a man, I was rocked to my core, and I was forget it. I'm like, oh my God, my life is done. All aspects of my life, right? So that's like the beginning of how all of this started, Ryan. And so and now comes to another defining moment. It's now I'm out of work, and I had kept the marital home, and my kids now are with me. Even though during mediation it was agreed 50-50, as the years progressed, each child wanted to move to their home and with their dad. So I had all 3 kids. And so 10 days after I got fired, I'm bringing my middle child, my son, who was 14 at the time, to therapy session. And well, he was 14. Let me see, the kids were 9, 11, 13 when the separation. So yeah, he was 14 at the time of the divorce. He's in with the therapist, and I'm in the waiting room, and she comes out crying and asks me to come in. And he's crying and says, sorry, daddy. And he hugs me. I'm like, what's going on? And was told that the therapist didn't, she could tell he wasn't in a right frame of mind. So she had to ask him, can you promise me you won't harm yourself in the next 2 weeks? And he said, I can't promise you. What I learned was the night before, as I'm in the den watching TV, he's in the master bathroom. I thought he was taking a shower. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, and he had made an attempt to cut himself. And she talked him down. And it was at that point where, I had to reach out to his mother, and we had to bring him into the hospital to get, whatever, the whole evaluation. And they interviewed us all individually. And he was released to me. No changes, just released to me at home. And so I was going to be with him at home. And that's when I first started to think that there was a reason why the universe or God removed me from my full-time job. Regardless of the reasons what happened there, now I was able to spend time both emotionally and physically with my son to really focus only on his health. And the experts said that he really needed inpatient care. So we found a place about an hour and a half away. They didn't have a bed till December 8th of 2018. So you're talking October 29 to December 8th, for almost 40 days. I was with him 24/7, Ryan. I didn't sleep. I checked on him, made sure. I said, my job for you, honey, is just to make sure you're safe. That's my job as your father.
Yeah.
So that again was brought me back down to the present moment. And so that was the soul shaking moment number 3. 4 came on Christmas Eve. And that's when my dad unexpectedly got sick. And 3 weeks later, in intensive care, passed away while my son was away. And the ironic piece to all of this, Ryan, is on December 8th, when we went to go drop my son off, my parents came up with us. And as they were in the waiting room, he pointed to my parents and said, I hope nothing happens to them when I'm here. And I reassured him nothing would happen. And something did. So feel that for a second. And
yeah,
I So that's where I was. And, I'm here now, so I didn't give up, but that was crazy. So any questions you have leading up to that, yeah,
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot to unpack there, and I really thank you so much for your candor with that.
yeah,
One thing that came up for me as you were sharing all that, and I'd love to kind of go into detail on a few of these,
mhm,
and how it has really shaped who you've become and who you've become for men and who you've become for yourself.
right.
But was it, what kind of support system did you have
Uh-huh.
as you were going through all this, as you were seeing, as you were seeing just like one domino fall right after another in barely a little over a half a year?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a darn good question because it's important to have a support system. And you know what? I had a ton of support systems. And the question is, what did I do with those support systems?
Yeah.
Very important question. Now, I ultimately learned later on in life that I've been a people pleaser my whole life. And I was big into compliance and just doing what I was supposed to do. So what I did, Ryan, is I did what I was supposed to do. I sucked it up. I manned up. I didn't show emotion. I shunned my sports systems, and I went to fix it to make sure my kids were okay and my mother was okay. That's what I did. So I turned away from my support systems because my self identity and those events caused me to fall into a victim or blame mindset. So I blamed my wife for the divorce. I blamed my boss for my firing. I blamed myself for my son's ailments, and I blamed God for my father. So, because I was in this victim and blame mindset, I shunned all my support systems. I turned away from the church and my spirituality. I turned away from my friends who they couldn't possibly understand, Ryan, because they're not going through it, right? Only I can fix this. So I did get through it. I did. Uh, I had promised my kids and to myself I'd be the best father I could be, so I didn't give up because I didn't want them to emulate that behavior. What I did do is I helped get them through it, but I was empty afterwards because I didn't allow myself time to grieve or to get the help to get me through it stronger. So I got through it. What I went from the caving in to the coping stage. I felt empty afterwards. Um, and so it it took it really took me to I had always wanted to write a book, and I never had the content. Now I did. Now I didn't have the confidence though that I could do it. So because right when COVID hit, like my dad died January of 2019, and it was on his 80th birthday, November 30th. He was healthy and he told me he was proud of me. So I said, Dad, I know you're proud of me, but why are you telling me that? He goes, I don't know how you're doing it. He goes, first the divorce, then the hospital stuff, and now, and mention my son. You're still taking care of the other two kids, and you come here every day to check on your mother and me. I don't know how you're doing it. My dad said, I know you've always wanted to own your own company, and I always told you not to. My dad was with IBM for 35 years. That was his generation, and I just followed suit. I said, okay, I'll be in
Sure.
healthcare for that year. So he said, do whatever's going to make you happy. Your mother and I will support you no matter what. At that time, Ryan, I just turned 50 and it's his birthday, and I started crying and I hugged him. I said, thank you, Dad. And that's when I created my company, Profit Compassion. I was going to start my own healthcare consulting company, and I would educate caregivers and patients and families how to navigate the plan of care so everybody would come out understanding and healthier. When my dad died, I let my dream die because of my self-limiting beliefs. And then COVID hit in March. So you're talking about my dad was only gone January, so almost less than a year, COVID hit. And I ended up buying a franchise in May of 19 instead of starting the healthcare consulting. And I did that for probably 3.5 years. And it had nothing to do with healthcare. and I was on autopilot. But it was during that time of after COVID where I couldn't meet people in person. I did that virtual, networking across the world, and I met a book editor who, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to write a book. And the way the book was written, it wasn't necessarily pen to paper. We were on Zoom because she was out in Arizona, I was in Jersey. I was telling my story to her, so she got an understanding. And the more I told the story, I decided she encouraged me to tell my story to anybody who would listen, male and female. The more I told my story, the more I healed from within. It was cathartic. And as I progressed and started to heal myself by telling the story, started to think like maybe I'm finding my purpose in life. And there came a point during the book where I did. And I woke up one morning and I had already been thinking about it. I walked away from the franchise. I breached a 10-year contract and said, I can't do this. This is not what I'm supposed to do. What I'm supposed to do, I hate the term supposed to do, like you should listen to other people, but what I believed I was meant to be on this earth for was to help men start telling their story. Because I realized I was suffering in silence, and many, many other men are. Because as I was telling my story, strangers, men and women alike, would start telling me their story. Some saying, I haven't told anybody this before, or whatever. So I was started to be told that my superpower was breaking down walls. So once I start telling my story and show that I can confidently be vulnerable, other people felt safe talking to me, and then they'd confidently feel vulnerable. And that started molding my current view of what it is to be a man. And so in essence, I am redefining what it means to man up, by still being strong and building a boundary around my self identity and self-worth, yet still being emotional and vulnerable and compassionate and showing emotion and asking for help and telling my story. You can be both. You have to be both. You don't have to choose between the two. So that's my new definition of manning up. It's been pretty powerful. People are relating to it too, Ryan. So.
No doubt. Helping men tell their story, that was like game show bells for me as you were sharing that, because as I'm finding through it, many of my audience know that I'm spearheading a collaborative book called The Expanding Man Chronicles that is coming out in December of 2023. And I'm one of 7 men who have gone through some soul shaking moments, who have gone through some moments of just like wondering just who we are as men in this world, and really expanding our definition of what it means to be a man. And it honestly sounds like it took, it took you having to get your life stripped down to the bare metal.
Mm-hmm.
That it almost occurs to me that that's exactly what you're doing, is that you're not only expanding your definition of what it means to be a man, but you're helping the men in your life, your clients, to be able to expand their definition of what it means to be a man.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Since we're each a unique human being, we may be more similar than we are different, yet we are still unique, and we have the right to have a unique definition of what it is to be a man. It's a matter of sharing experiences to see if we can get to a very close definition of what it is to be a man, so we can join together, and make this a movement rather than just something to talk about. So yeah, I'm definitely, the more we share, the more we learn, and the more we take action from what we learn, the better off we're going to be.
I love it. Well, let's rewind a little bit. As you were talking about just kind of the 4 pillars, so to speak, of how you rebuilt yourself, I find it very curious that there's like 4 distinct pillars that a lot of men have. Their family, fatherhood, their work, and their romantic relationship, so to speak. And seeing all that stuff break down at once really helped to, really helped to reshape just who you've started to become and are becoming more and more in this world, and
Right.
really starting to see more and more about who you are,
Mhm.
about who you were, I should say, and are like redefining that.
Right. No, it's true. And when you think about the different aspects of life, when we try to change something, we think we have to change everything. And you don't necessarily have to. You really think about your mindset. You change a little things and be more positive in your mindset, and with gratitude, everything else changes. And I look at the wheel of life. You have just those areas you talked about. You have your spirituality, you got your family life, romantic, business, career, financial, fatherhood. What men tend to do is when one of those goes wrong, we allow it all to fall apart. And what I've seen is many women are able to somehow keep all the other parts of their life kind of steady while they work on the core reason the one issue is going, one part of their life's going wrong. So women seem to be able to address the root cause by asking for help. They have their women who they talk to, and all these support systems. And men tend to go after the symptom. Men will go, hey, go with our buddies to the bar and drink, so we forget, thinking that that's going to take care of it. The next morning the hangover wears off and we still have the root cause issue. Women handle it much more mature way. So what I'm really imploring men to do is, you don't have to just stop everything and fix one thing. You can still care for the other aspects of your life and ask for help, and improve the area that's not going well. And that's what we really need to do, because once a man gives up on one thing and gives up on everything, the life falls apart. It doesn't have to happen.
Exactly, exactly. You bring up a really good point, because a lot of times when, and I have been very guilty of this myself, is that when we find, and also can kind of have a bit of an addictive mindset,
Mhm.
but when we have a certain aspect of our life that's falling apart,
Right.
like just for example, when my dad passed away in December 2014.
Sorry.
And as he got sick and as he was getting worse, my stress eating was through the roof.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was close to 300 pounds
Wow.
the day that he died. And I was incredibly unhealthy. I was incredibly, like, I was a totally different person,
Hmm.
but I couldn't see it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
couldn't see it. I was so deep in it, I couldn't see it. And a lot of times, men, when a certain aspect of their life is falling apart, they'll try to fill it with, with food, with drinking, with drugs, with sex, with money, with
Hmm.
gambling.
Hmm.
They'll try to fill it with something else, but not addressing the root cause, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. Men will turn to what I call pain numbing substances. And that could be anything like sex, porn, drugs, food. Yeah, I was a stress eater as well. Avoidance is another addiction men end up getting. You avoid things, and
You don't
um,
say.
yeah, or even the suffering and silence piece is an addiction, ends up being an addiction. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I think the way that we can fix this issue is to encourage men that when things are going well, continue to expand your self-awareness. You talk about expanding man. Self-awareness is so key. And when you spend time on yourself, it's really selfless, not selfish. And if we can really build a solid mental foundation during our conscious awareness, which is only 5% of our brain activity is conscious, 95% is on autopilot. But we've got an opportunity during those 5% brain activity that's conscious to actually be purposeful, to change some habits, to make those habits more positive. That's by changing your words, changing your mindset. And once you do that and it becomes habit, then all that good stuff becomes that unconscious. And then we won't give up on ourselves, God forbid, when stuff starts to go poorly for us.
Yeah.
So it really takes, when things are going well, to work on your self-improvement. It's kind of sounds counterintuitive, but you don't need to wait for something to go wrong to work on yourself. And that's kind of what I encourage most people. It's the same in business. Work on improving your company when the company's doing well. Don't wait till things are going poorly to work on that business aspect. So very similar.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I find with what you just said, I find that self-love is really such a base in all that, because if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not, if your diet is messed up, and I'm not just talking about your food, if like the
Yeah.
stuff that you watch on TV
Yeah. Yeah.
is, kind of out of balance, if you're not exercising, if you're not eating well, if you're not drinking enough water, if you're not, spending time in prayer and meditation, if that works for you,
Right.
there's just if there's just a lot there that can fall apart in a heartbeat if you don't have that base, if you don't
That's
have
true.
that base of self-love. Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's true. Absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. um Couple more things that I wanted to speak to you about. You mentioned earlier that you wrote a book.
I did.
I'll
I
have what
did.
she's having. I love that title, by the way. Can you talk a little bit about that book and really how it ended up coming to be? I know you spoke a little bit about it, how it, just like telling your story really helped you to find that voice,
Yeah.
but talk a little bit about how that book came to be.
No, absolutely. As I initially, I want to just talk about resiliency without really thinking that I was going to be diving deep into self-reflection. During the course of writing the book, I realized I was a people pleaser my whole life. And so the subtitle of the book is Memoir of a Reformed People Pleaser. In the I'll have what she's having piece, some people of our age think, did that come from when Harry met Sally? Because no, that wasn't when Meg Ryan was faking an orgasm. No, I'll have what she's having. In my purposes, yes, I could put it in a restaurant, but it was kind of like, even when I was dating my wife, we'd be sitting down at a restaurant, and the waitress would come over and ask us what we wanted. And while we were looking at the menu, I would look at him like, I'm going to get the steak, right? Drew wanted the steak. Waitress would come and go to my wife and say, ma'am, what would you like? And she would go, you know what? I'd like the salmon. And then the waitress would say, sir, and what would you like? And I'm ready to say the steak. And I'll be like, salmon sounds good. I'll have what she's having. And then I'd bite my tongue and say, I wanted the steak. Why the hell did I say salmon? And I repeat stuff like that. Didn't necessarily have to be food in a restaurant, but it was any kind a decision was to be made. And I would let the other person, whether it was my wife or anybody else, go first. And I would know what I wanted to do, but I would always let them go first. And then I would say, that sounds good. Well, let's do that. And so that kept happening and perpetuated. And I've been doing that most of my life. And when I started to look in, really dive deep into those decisions and my behaviors, I was like, damn, I'm doing all these behaviors that are people pleasing, that are confused with being nice. And that's what did it. And
I hear
so
that. Yeah.
the whole book is geared towards the Drew of 2023, educating the Drew of 1999 through 2022. And, if you could speak to your younger self and say, hey, you know what you're doing, boom, hoping that your younger self would take your advice, knowing that he probably wouldn't. And also knowing that maybe you don't want him to, because then you wouldn't be who you are right now. So I didn't write the book in terms of I should have, I could have, I would have, or regret. I wrote it that, hey, guys who are right now, the Drew of 1999 through 2022, here's what I did, and here's probably why. And here's why I want you to be aware of your decisions and your thoughts and your beliefs and all that kind of stuff. Because I don't want you years later to say I shoulda, coulda, why didn't I?
That is incredibly powerful, because one thing that came to mind is that even as you're still creating yourself in the image that you want to create it today,
Right.
there's still going to be aspects from younger Drew
Mhm.
that you want to keep, that you want to keep in play. despite the mistakes that you might have made as a younger person, as a younger man, despite what, kind of led to
Mhm.
a lot of the breakdowns that happened a few years
Right.
ago.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's a very good point. And I have a new definition of happiness, because with me, happiness, I always allowed happiness to be external circumstances. That if something outside happens, that makes me happy. And that's very harmful and unhealthy, because then you're always chasing something. I have a new definition of healthy, and it's more of, I mean, of happy, and it's more of a formula. Happiness equals my standards plus my belief system. My standards are what you're talking about, the young Drew. I'm not going to change that. That's integrity, it's courage, it's loyalty, it's empathy. That's me as a human being. It's the belief system that is the variable that needs to change. And just like you and everybody else in this world, our belief system is kind of formed for us by the time we're between 7 and 10 years old, from our parents, and it's nobody's fault. It's this generation of beliefs keep getting passed down and taught to us. And so before we know it, I mean, you think about it, when we're 7 to 10 years old, we're already told what our religion is. We're told what our political beliefs are. We're told what our favorite sports teams are. So that's what's handed to us. So by the time we're like 18, 90% of our belief systems kind of formed for us. And unless we stop and pause and think and say, I think this because I was told I'm supposed to believe this. If we're able to say there must be other ways to think out there. Now, sometimes it takes a man 50 years to start looking outside himself to find out what else is out there. And some people, it takes a tap on the shoulder and they do it at age 18. It just happened to take me a long time. So
Right.
happiness to me now is not external stuff. It comes from within. So I changed my belief system. My standards stayed the same, right? That's my constant. The variable I change is my belief system. So now I don't regret things anymore. I forgive, because I only knew what I didn't know, right? I'm not afraid of the future anymore. I'm not anxious, because I look at what I desire and my faith in it instead of being afraid of the future. And then in the current moment, no more victim and blame mentality. That was in my belief system. It's now gratitude. So I didn't change my standards. They stayed the same, like you suggested. So that's why happiness to me is standards plus belief system.
That's incredibly powerful. It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful to
Mhm.
just really kind of absorb just what happiness means to everybody, because a lot of times I find men can be very vulnerable to this.
Mhm.
The whole, hey, is my bank account healthy enough, or are the women following me. I mean, that external validation
Mhm. Yeah.
piece, so many men crave and need, just desperately need in their lives. But really finding true happiness is being able to, when your head hits the pillow at night, are you satisfied with just who you're being in the world? It's like the line from the old Earth, Wind, and Fire song, "Mighty, Mighty." Um, what you got to do about your living thing? Will you make it better, or will you just complain?
Yeah.
And that there's just so much,
Yeah.
like, there's just so much power and so much choice in that.
Yeah. No, it's so
Because if
yeah.
we allow, yeah, go ahead.
No. It's so true. And actually, just on that song, those words, it was just last week I came up with this acronym that the acronym itself is CIAW. It doesn't spell anything, but what it means is the C is confidence is sexy. All right. So you ask yourself, how do you get to sexy? How do you get the confidence? Right. So the C is confidence is sexy. The I is intention leads to action. All right. CIA is action leads to wins. CIAW wins leads to confidence. So confidence is sexy. The way to get to confidence, you have to have the right intention, purposeful. When you have intention, then you act on it. When you act on good intention, you start to win. As you build those small wins, you get more confident. Confidence is sexy. And so that is, I believe, the way to go, to help all the stuff I talked about. There's no magic pill. But in order to build your self-worth, self-identity, self-confidence, you need to start winning. And how do you win? You got to take some action, man. And what kind of action do you take? It's got to be intentional and purposeful, and do it for good, do it for joy, do it for service. And that's all confidence is sexy. And in turn, for men, women love confident men.
Yes.
They don't love the wishy-washy people pleaser that I once was. They love confidence, So,
Man, I could talk about this stuff for hours because you're so right in that. What a huge fear that I personally have is, am I taking the wrong action? Am I going to go out there? Am I going to fail? Am I going to, look foolish? But one thing that I have to keep remembering is that nobody is born. I mean, if you think of like a great musician or a great athlete nowadays, nobody is born with with that type of presence, with that type of skills. I mean, yes, I'm a huge fan of the guitar player Derek Trucks. Derek Trucks has been one of the baddest guitar players on the planet since he was in fifth grade. But even now, he's in his early 40s now, but even now, he's still getting better. He's still improving. He's still learning about just what makes him tick. Does everything that he do succeed? Absolutely not. But he knows enough about himself and what kind of musician he is to be able to learn from those mistakes. Same thing in baseball. A baseball player who hits 350 for his career is probably going to the Hall of Fame, but you're still failing almost 60% of the time or 70% of the time. I don't even know what the math is on that. But you get my point. There's, if you're afraid to take those actions, if you're afraid to fail, if you're afraid to look foolish, you're never going to get that confidence that you really need and you really desire.
No, I think that's so true. And then when you sit back and wonder, why did this person succeed and this person didn't? I mean, there's a lot of variables, but when you think about it, if a human being has a solid support system and people around them, good mentors and advisors who are going to build them up rather than knock them down, who are going to fill their cup because they believe in their dream, then you're taught not to be afraid of failing. The thing is, in our education system and a lot of things that surround us, we're told not to fail. We're given limits. And so, if you taken an exam and, got to get that 100, and you talk to kids who are perfectionists, and if they get a 98, they're mad at themselves. They beat themselves up. There's a lot of problems in our society where people are told failure is bad. Beat yourself up. I'm wrong. No. You learn from that. The only way to learn is to have a contrasting experience,
Yeah.
And I think those people who succeed, they do it scared because they, in their life, were told, you have no limits. You can be what you want to be. And so if you're told and you learn that you have no limits, then there's no such thing as failure. There's win and learn, right? And there's something so beautiful about that. And, we're all born with that, Ryan. We're born with that child. As a child, we don't put limitations on ourselves. We ride a bike, we fall, we cut our knee, we get back up, we ride, we learn to tie our shoelace in a weird way, and then we perfect that. We crawl before we walk, before we run. The issue is, once people tell us we're not a child anymore and now we're an adult, they form this different definition of an adult, and we shut our young child inside of us off. He's still there, Ryan. Yours is there,
Yeah.
mine is there. We got to start saying yes to our inner child instead of saying, no, I'm an adult. It's a bunch of bull. So we got to relearn what we learned, pal. So yeah, those people who succeed, no one ever put limits on them. And if they did, they shook those limits off and they're listening to their inner child. That's why musicians and athletes are so good. They're listening to their inner child.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you think about there's no limits out there,
Yeah.
their footprints, their human footprints on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And more than likely, they're going to be human footprints on Mars within the next, 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Limits are made up. Limits
Absolutely.
are fictional.
Absolutely. Let me give you a good quote. Someone told me the other day. It's from Steve Jobs. It says, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Yes. Preach. That'll preach 8 days out of the week, my man.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing that I want to talk about before we wrap up here. We spoke about this a little before we started recording here,
Mm-hmm.
but your son, who had some of the issues with suicide attempts and ideation.
Yeah.
How's he doing now?
He's doing much better, and thank you for asking. Yesterday, which was October 29th, was 5 years to the day. That was the day when the therapist came out of the office and did all that. So that was, and when I thought about that yesterday morning, I initially had a sad sinking feeling, and then I shook my head and said, no, brain, it's positive. Because then I said, well, how is he now compared to how he was 5 years ago to the day? And he's doing much better. And today is actually his 2:20 p.m. Eastern. He's going to start his first day of technical school, Universal Technical Institute, to be an auto mechanic. It's taken him a long time to find himself. And when he finally told me that's what he wanted to do, and this was only a few months ago, I said, let's do it. So he starts today. And I think it's just beautiful timing that he has found his purpose. And then I called him today. I said, listen, I'm proud of you. And this is why. And I said, 5 years ago, you were in a different place and you chose not to give up. And I'm proud to be your father, because where you are 5 years later, you may not be where you want to go or you want to be, but you are in that direction. And I had told him, and he said, thanks, Dad. I said, I love you. I love you too. So yeah, we're all a work in progress. And I encourage all of you that dates to me are important, because you want to try to lift yourself up when a date comes to your mind that has a negative thought to it or a sad thought. Think about the positive within that, and look to where you are now and see if you're in a better place. Odds are, if you have a growth mindset, more positive, you'll be in a better place. So he's in a better place right now, Ryan. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what he's going to do once he starts this whole journey of the auto mechanic thing, because we all need a good auto mechanic.
Yes, we do. honest auto mechanic too. Yeah.
A good and honest auto mechanic. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome, man. I'm sure a big piece of him, finally finding just what his passion was being able to look at you and being able to see the example that you were leading of being able to crawl out of that hole,
right?
And finding your passion.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It makes me feel good, because if I had curled up and given up, who knows where my kids would be right now. I got 3 awesome children. You want to leave a legacy. That's, I'm 55. I'm not sure how much longer I have. I hope it's a long time, but in the time I'm on this earth, man, I want to build people up. So that's my goal.
Absolutely. And last but not least, you've got a podcast yourself, do you not?
I do. I'm going to have you on it, by the way. It's called From Caving In to Crushing It. And I bring men and women on who have gone through, as you say, soul shaking moments. I say faith shaking moments. But really, we have a decision to make when those things happen. We can either decide to give up or decide to move forward and become better human beings because of our adversity, not despite it. So yeah, and I'm very proud of that. Right now I've recorded around 70 episodes, and I'm looking forward to you being on, and share your story. And in turn, you may heal yourself even more and heal others by them hearing your story, Ryan.
Absolutely. And we'll include links to all of that. We'll include a link to your book as well in the show notes on this podcast here. Well, Drew, this has been truly an incredible conversation. And I'd love to have you back one day.
I'd love to be back. Thanks so much. I'm
All
grateful.
right.
Grateful.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'm also grateful to our mutual friend, Oscar Capel, for connecting us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Oscar. Yes.
Absolutely. How can people find you out there on the interwebs, my friend?
Well, you can go to my website, profitcompassion.com. I am bringing back my men's group, rebranding it. It's called the Mindful Man Movement. So I'm bringing that back. I also host a webinar once a month. It's called Get Over Yourself, How to Use the Caveman Formula to overcome self-sabotage. The next one will be November 30th. So I'll give you the link to register. It's a free webinar. So those will be the two things right now. I got the men's group coming up and the webinar.
All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Drew. And thank you for joining us here in the Solar Powered Podcast, a presentation of Royal Hearts Media. For more information about me, just go to my website. That's royalheartsmedia.com. Or you can follow me on the social media machine at Ryan Hall Writes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now on TikTok. Or you can just shoot me a good old-fashioned email at royalheartscoaching@gmail.com. But that'll do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Ryan Hall saying thanks for listening. So long for now, and go get solar powered. Take care.